and welcome to the Visionary Chronicles. Appreciate you being with me today, as always. For those that are new to the podcast, I'm Bryan Smeltzer. I spent 30 years in executive leadership roles at brands like Oakley, Adidas, TaylorMade, K-Swiss, Schutt Sports, built and sold my own brand to a VC firm. And now I advise CMOs and brand leaders through Liquid Mind on building brands that last. And today in the Visionary Chronicles, we're going to talk about a subject, the reality distortion. How visionary leaders bend reality to build the impossible. And this comes from my new book, The Visionary Leader, new best-selling book, The Visionary Leader. And it really is something that I find fascinating because there's so many leaders that don't possess this skill. So I always like to kind of lead wherever I can with a quote, and I thought this one was great from somebody that actually worked with a leader that had or is actually tagged with creating the term reality distortion. And it's from Andy Hertzfeld, a member of the original Macintosh team, describing how working with Steve Jobs was. And he said, in his presence, reality is malleable. He can convince anyone of practically anything. What he was describing had a name, the Reality Distortion Field. And it may be the most misunderstood and yet at the same time the most powerful principle in the entire visionary leader framework. Most people hear reality distortion and they think deception, manipulation, getting people to believe things that aren't true. And from my review in The Visionary Leader, and I talk about it, dedicated one chapter actually to just this subject. And that's not what this is. The reality distortion field is a visionary leader's ability to influence and inspire others by creating a perception that differs from conventional reality. Not to deceive, but to build what doesn't exist yet. So today we're going to break down exactly how it works. It's fascinating. Why it works and how you can apply it to your leadership without crossing the line from inspiration into deception. So let's talk about bending reality. And the term reality distortion field, the RDF, and why this matters is associated with Steve Jobs, co-founder of Apple. It refers to a visionary leader's ability to influence and inspire, as I'd mentioned, others by creating a perception that differs from conventional reality. And I find that to be really important because back to Andy's quote where he said, in his presence, reality is malleable, meaning you can form it. He can convince anyone of practically anything. Andy Hertzfeld, Macintosh team member on Steve Jobs. And again, here's where most people get wrong about reality distortion field. They confuse the RDF with manipulation. They think it's about convincing people of things that aren't true. That's not what the best visionary leaders do with the RDF. They use reality distortion as a tool for positive reinforcement and motivation by emphasizing the positive aspects of a vision and downplaying potential challenges. And they think different. And they define ideas considered outside the box by our current world's mindset, meaning that they can see the future that nobody else can, and they need to not manipulate, but inspire those working with them to achieve the impossible. So the distinction matters because every leader faces this moment. Every leader. The moment where the gap between what you are and where you're going is so large that rational people would say it can't be done. This goes all the way back to Henry Ford when he was inventing the 8-cylinder engine, and the engineers unequivocally said it cannot be done. And at the same time, Henry Ford famously said, if I asked my customers what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. So in that moment, the question is, do you accept reality as it is, or do you lead from the reality you're building? That choice, more than resources, time, and even talent, is what separates visionary leaders from everyone else, and why the reality distortion field is so imperative for visionaries to achieve the impossible. So insight number one from this is the method. What the RDF actually does. Leaders who utilize reality distortion field excel at 4 specific behaviors. Understanding these is the difference between applying RDF with integrity and stumbling into manipulation that most people think it is, but it is not. Number one is they reframe challenges. Instead of seeing obstacles as insurmountable roadblocks, as most leaders do, they view them as opportunities to innovate, learn, create solutions others may not have yet considered. Think about how differently a team responds when their leader says, "We can do this," versus, "We haven't figured this out yet." Same obstacle, same situation, framed completely different on its trajectory. And this goes into, famously said by Steve, questioning the status quo. Visionary leaders challenge conventional thinking and push boundaries. They use reality distortion to encourage team leaders, inspiring them to achieve ambitious goals and think beyond existing limitations, to consider possibilities that others find impossible. While at Oakley, Jim Gennard didn't accept that performance eyewear had to look like performance eyewear. He questioned every assumption, and he built performance eyewear category. The next is building confidence through conviction. Visionaries convey a strong belief in the feasibility of their vision, and even in the face of skepticism. Their goal is to rally support and to create momentum. Here's the critical point. They're not pretending to believe. They genuinely believe. The RDF works because it's authentic. The moment it becomes performance, it becomes manipulation. Remember that as a leader. The next point is they introduce fresh perspectives by reshaping how people see what's possible. Visionary leaders introduce fresh perspectives and ideas that can reshape markets, industries, and even the course of history. I've read in detail in The Visionary Leader Leonardo da Vinci. Still to this day, he's recreating history. Apple just didn't make a better phone. They changed what a phone was. That required everyone around Steve to stop seeing the existing category and start seeing the category that didn't exist yet. And that was all foundational to Steve, that he had to bleed through others to execute his plan. The next is you have to have a practical application. In your next leadership meeting, test this. So if you're listening, write it down. I'm curious to see if you could give me feedback on this, and I love the feedback, but I love asking these questions. In your next leadership meeting, test this. Replace, "Here's why this is difficult," with, "Here's what becomes possible if we solve this." Replace, "That's not how we do things," with, "What if we approached it differently?" The next is replace certainty about limitations with curiosity about possibilities. Insight number 2 is the risk. Why embracing failure is foundational with RDF. Embracing risk is a critical foundation characteristic of visionary leaders. Everyone has it. And when they use reality distortion to encourage failure through risk and achieve innovations through experimentation, a culture, and I talk about culture a lot because that's what brands are. They're not a product, they're a culture. Until you have a culture, you're not a brand, you're just a product. A culture that embraces revolutionary ideas creates an environment beneficial to breakthroughs and disruptive innovation. This is where most leaders stumble. They want the RDF without risk tolerance that makes it sustainable. But you can't have one without the other. So, how do visionary leaders create the conditions for the RDF to succeed? They cultivate an entrepreneurial mindset throughout their entire company. They empower employees. I love that word. If you're not empowering your employees to make decisions, to succeed in their role, have you take a back seat with humility, you're not doing anyone a good favor inside of your company, team, or brand. They empower employees to think like entrepreneurs, encouraging them to take ownership of their work and contribute ideas that can drive business forward. They encourage experimentation, embrace calculated risk, and provide a support environment for employees to explore new ideas without fear of failure. They set aspirational goals that inspire both themselves and their teams. These goals are often exceed what may seem achievable in the short term, pushing individuals to think big and stretch their capabilities. Ask yourself these questions. Go through that again. How do you create the conditions for RDF? I can tell you 99.5% of all companies don't do this, even though they know the benefits of doing it. The key word here is calculated. That's a critical distinction you need to understand between reckless risk and calculated risk. Reckless risk ignores the downside. Calculated risk understands the downside and decides the upside is worth it. I always took offense because I was a true entrepreneur. Before I sold my apparel company to a VC after 10 years of profitable growth, I started with a penny or nothing and built something. That is an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur is not someone who starts out with $10 million and grows it to 15 or 20 or even 100 million. At the outset of the building of your company, there was no risk. So cancel being an entrepreneur. That's just my philosophy, and I believe it wholeheartedly. And this is what calculated risk is. When we talk about entrepreneurs, they're not risk takers. They understand risk and learn how to manage it. Visionary leaders don't eliminate risk. They build cultures where intelligent risk-taking is expected, failure is data, and learning compounds over time. At TaylorMade, when we disrupted our own product lines before the market demanded it, that was a calculated risk in action. We understood what we were risking. We decided the alternative, protecting the past, was riskier. So what's your practical application? 3 points here. What risk are you willing to avoid that your vision actually demands? What are you protecting the past? Where are you protecting the past instead of building for your future? Number 3 is, does your culture treat failure as data or a career threat? Insight number 3 is what I call the line. How to use the RDF without losing trust. This is where it gets really important for you to understand, because the RDF can be used well or very bad. And understanding the difference is what separates visionary leaders from those who build short-term momentum but long-term cynicism. And hopefully you understand the difference. What keeps the RDF ethical? And that's a question I get many times when we talk about RDF. Visionary leaders must balance the need for inspiration with a commitment to truthfulness, avoiding intentional deception. They exhibit resilience in the face of setbacks instead of being discouraged by challenges. They view them really as a part of the journey and use setbacks as opportunities to learn and to iterate. Very much Thomas Edison, 10,000 ways inventing the light bulb would not work. Imagine if he stopped at 8,634. We wouldn't have the light bulb. Now, not everybody has that persistence, but you understand why you need to have iterations, and failures are not failures. They're iterations and learning experiences. So what are the 3 failure modes? Failure mode number 1 is overpromising without execution. If reality distortion involves overpromising without a realistic execution plan, it could lead to disappointment, loss of trust when expectations aren't met. The RDF requires a credible path, not just a compelling vision. You need to understand the steps to execute the strategy to achieve your vision. Failure number 2 is killing transparency. A relentless reality distortion field can sometimes hinder open communication and lead to a lack of transparency. The goal is to expand what people believe is possible, not to hide what's real. Number 3 is credibility erosion over time. Visionaries must use reality distortion strategically or face credibility challenges short-term and long-term if their promises really consistently fall short, or the gap between the perception and the reality becomes too big for people to understand. So what's a strategic tool you can use to time your vision? Strategic silence can be a powerful tool if your arsenal as a leader. While your team values open communication, there are times when discretion is a better part of valor, meaning that they don't need to know everything. You may be making a pivot, but you're not changing the vision or the strategy around it. The key here is to be nimble, to be liquid. The key is balance. Know when transparency builds trust and when temporary confidentiality serves a greater purpose long term. Master this and you'll maintain team confidence and gain a tactical edge in really executing your strategies. Remember, it's not about withholding. It's about timing your vision for maximum impact and really long-term benefit to your team, company, product, service, whatever it is. So what is your practical application with this? There's 3 points. 1 is, does your vision have a credible path to execution behind it? Number 2 is, are you using inspiration to expand possibility or to avoid hard conversations with people? Number 3 is, when you communicate vision, are you building trust or are you spending it? Insight number 4 is what I call the legacy. Why the RDF matters beyond you. Here's where the reality distortion field becomes truly transformative in your company. Not just for the individual leader, but for the organization, the industry, and the people who work alongside you. Rather than focusing on deception or unrealistic aspirations, visionary leaders use RDF strategy to create a compelling narrative around their ideas. It's a beautiful strategy. During ideation sessions, they enthusiastically communicate their vision and conviction to inspire passion among team members. We do this all the time with Liquid Mind when we do our whiteboarding with ideations. This environment encourages team members to question existing reality and think outside the box, challenging the status quo continuously and pushing boundaries to explore unconventional solutions to their issues. And this is the culture that it creates. And I talk about culture all the time because it's so important. You are not a brand until you have a culture, a community. And this is the culture that the RDF creates and why it's so important. The RDF helps leaders continually and relentlessly establish disruptive goals, entrench a mindset that embraces stretching beyond perceived limitations, and create a culture that values innovation and risk-taking. You can't have one without the other. No great product has ever been commercialized without taking a risk. Not one. When the RDF is used well, these leaders highlight past successes, use them as examples to build confidence in achieving new ambitious goals. It masters the art of persuasive communication to convey ideas convincingly because somebody else has done it. And what is the transformative impact? In bending reality to succeed, visionary leaders combine imagination, strategic thinking, adaptability, and commitment to continuous innovation and building your product pipeline. By challenging conventional norms and inspiring others to possibilities, they contribute to transformative change within their industries and well beyond that. Think about what Jobs built. Steve Jobs built at Apple. He didn't create just products. He created a generation of people who believed that one person with a clear vision could change an entire industry. That belief outlasted him. That's what the RDF looks like at scale. So, what are the practical applications in this area? Number one, are you creating a culture where your team believes in what's possible? Number two, are you building leaders who will carry the vision beyond you, beyond the four walls of where your ideation is started? Is your narrative compelling enough to survive your absence from the room? So, here are some closing thoughts and also a final challenge. The successful application of reality distortion hinges on a leader's ability to align vision with a realistic path to executing that vision and to navigate the ethical considerations associated with shaping perceptions where people don't feel it's deception. Let me be direct about what this means in practice in your company, product, service, whatever it is. The RDF is not permission to lie. It's not a license to build hype without substance. It is permission and responsibility to lead from the future instead of the present or the past. To hold a vision with such conviction that others begin to see it. To create these conditions where people exceed what they believed they were capable of. Steve Jobs didn't convince the Macintosh team to build the impossible by telling them that it was easy. He convinced them by making them believe and see they were the only people on earth who could do it. That's the RDF at its best. Not distorting reality, expanding it. So here's your challenge this week. I always like to leave with a challenge. Is identify one place in your organization where conventional thinking is limiting what's possible. And it could be any area. One assumption everyone has accepted as fixed. Then ask, what if that assumption is wrong? What becomes possible if we ignore that limitation? Who on my team would rise to that challenge if I asked them to do it? That's how you started bending reality. Transform, reinvent, revolutionize. That's not a tagline. That's the operating principle of every visionary leader who ever used the reality distortion field to build something that changed the world. So, if this episode resonated with you, I encourage you. I talk about this at detail, and pick up a copy of The Visionary Leader, The Success Principles of the World's Greatest Visionaries. It's available now at Amazon and wherever books are sold. This book draws directly from the frameworks we discuss on the Visionary Chronicles. It's your blueprint for building the kind of leadership that creates generational impact. The link is in the show notes. And if you're a CMO, founder, brand leader, and you'd like to apply these frameworks I talk about directly to your business, I work with a select, narrow number of clients on a private advisory basis through Liquid Mind. And if that's you, visit Liquid Mind site, liquidmindsist.com/advisory. Click the link in the show notes to learn more. And this is something I feel is extremely important for those that are looking for individual advisory support. And one quick ask before I let you go. If this episode gave you one idea, just one you can use this week, would you please take 30 seconds to leave a review on Apple Podcasts? It would be greatly appreciated. It tells the algorithm this show is worth finding, and it helps other leaders discover the content. Search the Visionary Chronicles, scroll to ratings and review, and leave an honest note. I read every one of them, and I would be greatly appreciated, and thank you for doing this. And for a weekly brand strategy and leadership insights I don't share anywhere else, subscribe to the Visionary Advisory Letter at bryansmeltzer.com, bryansmeltzer.com. The link is also in the show notes. And again, thank you for joining me on the Visionary Chronicles, where the future is created by those bold enough to shape it. Until next time, keep innovating, keep leading, and keep shaping the future. Stay true, stay authentic, be different, be great. Enjoy the journey along the way. I'm Bryan Smeltzer. See you in the next Chronicle.